So my name is Géraldine Choua from the University of Paris Dauphine. I usually co-host this webinar on material culture with Dr. Ariane Fento. Unfortunately, she cannot make it today, but she will probably try to join us later. In any case, I'm very happy to welcome Raluca Parfentie, and she is a colleague with a sweet tooth. She's going to talk about Soviet candies today, a very unusual and lively and very exciting topic. Let me introduce Raluca for you. Raluca Parfentie holds a PhD in philology from the University of Bucharest. Her doctoral thesis, which she wrote in 2019, was about interwar Romanian food, a visual and linguistic approach. So she is interested in candies, but more generally in the connection between food, culture, and society. She has published several papers on the topic in England, in Romania, and the Republic of Moldova. Her study on Soviet candies and propaganda was printed in a book which was recently published in Romanian in 2016. Is that right?
Yes.
She also recently published an article entitled Gendering Taste in Interwar Romania. It was published in a book called A Feast of the Senses, a book on food history, A Feast of the Senses in Europe, 1750 to the present, in Routledge Publishing House, and it was just published in 2021. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Raluca on this exciting topic on candies, Soviet candies. And I think that you're ready for your presentation, your PowerPoint presentation. We made a few, well, we had a few technical moments before the webinar. It was a little slow in the beginning for the first slide, but don't worry, okay, be patient. It will speed up, okay? So thank you, Raluca, and so to speak, the floor is yours.
Thank you a lot for the invitation. I'm really glad to be able to share today with all of you the results of my research based on 200 Soviet candy wrappers, which I gathered from different virtual sources, and that appeared in between 1918 and 1933. And that being said, I hope you'll enjoy the presentation. So, coming to power after the October Revolution, the Bolsheviks used propaganda more than ever in order to spread their ideas and legitimize their authority. Everything served as a means of propaganda, but nothing seemed good enough. Plays and movies had a limited numbers of viewers. Due to the high rate of illiteracy, newspapers had had their shortcomings as well. Communicating through images seemed like a better choice. In fact, in 1918, according to foreign visitors, the streets of Russia were all covered in propaganda posters. But the party had one more problem to solve: the lack of paper. It needed something efficient, cheap, attractive, but also less paper consuming. And this means of propaganda was soon to be found: the candy wrappers. The Bolsheviks perceived the potential of candies as political militants and did everything to benefit from them. Yes?
Your PowerPoint presentation is not on yet.
Why?
We don't see it. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay, but I don't understand why it's not there, because I will. I don't know what's happening.
We tried it and you stopped it.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to solve the problem right now. Does it go right now?
Not for me.
I wonder if I can log in once again or something, because
Yeah, let's try that.
yes, please. Do you see it right now?
I'm afraid not.
Still not seeing.
No.
I don't know what's happening, because it worked before when we tried.
5 minutes ago. Coming. Yes.
Does it go? Okay. So I'll start it once again. Is it okay right now? Yes.
Just see your screen, but we don't see the PowerPoint itself.
Oh, still not seeing.
We see the desktop.
Because it appears that I share my screen.
Okay, let's try. Let me try. I'm going to ask everybody. Oh, here we go. Yes, good. Let's go.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Still okay? Okay. So, as I said, coming to power after the October Revolution, the Bolsheviks used propaganda more than ever in order to spread their ideas and legitimize their authority. Everything served as a means of propaganda, but nothing seemed good enough. Plays and movies had a limited numbers of viewers. Due to the high rate of illiteracy, newspapers had their shortcomings as well. Communicating through images seemed like a better choice. In fact, in 1918, according to foreign visitors, the streets of Russia were all covered in propaganda posters. But the party had one more problem to solve: the lack of paper. It needed something efficient, cheap, attractive, but also less paper consuming. and this means of propaganda was soon to be found: the candy wrappers. The Bolsheviks perceived the potential of candies as political supporters and did everything to benefit from them. Candies were loved by consumers of all ages. They were also desired, since from the first time when the word candy, confect, appeared in a Russian dictionary in the 18th century and until the beginning of the 20th century, candies kept their status of luxury items. As we already know, everything that seems out of reach is usually perceived as being better and is wanted more. Last but not least, candies matched perfectly with one of the most popular beverages in Russia, tea, also a luxury item for a long time. For instance, in the 18th century, Russian people had to pay the same amount of money in order to buy 200 grams of tea or a horse. It is also important to know that Russian people had two ways of drinking tea: mixing the sugar into the tea, a habit called vnakladku, or sipping the tea through a sugar cube, a habit called prikusku, and mentioned, for instance, by Dostoevsky in his novel Crime and Punishment. What the Bolsheviks aimed for and tried was to convince as many people as possible to replace sugar cubes with candies. In such a way, the propaganda wrappers could enter in their homes and in their mind. So after the October Revolution, the party took two interesting decisions. First, to rename all candy factories and candies, giving them a proper name. And the second decision was to create Centrochai, an organization that distributed tea for free to the army and workers. The party brought tea to the people, but it also brought them the opportunity to consume something sweet. We shouldn't forget that in the Soviet movies or cartoons, tea almost always appeared accompanied by something sweet. As we can see in this movie scene, for example, a movie called Tractor Drivers, made in 1939. Or in this cartoon scene called Free from Prostokvashino, made in 1978, where the guest is invited to take a seat and, as we will see, to drink tea with candies. Kat's reaction here is not so unusual, in fact. Chocolate was very expensive in the Soviet Union. In fact, from the beginning, the party had to decide what kind of sweetmeats were better for their propaganda plans. And chocolate wasn't the best option at the beginning because of its high price. Back in the Soviet Union, for 1 kilogram of chocolate, people had to pay the same amount of money they had to pay for 1 kilogram of caviar, 4 kilograms of beef, 60 kilograms of potatoes, or 120 eggs. On the other hand, the party knew that it can count on another type of sweetmeats, like caramels or candy drops. These ones were a better choice because they were more accessible, being almost 3 times cheaper than chocolate, and also because they seemed to go great with the prikusku habit of drinking tea. Surprisingly or not, after the party took these decisions, famous people like the artist and poet Vladimir Mayakovsky appeared saying that they are drinking tea with candy drops, describing this new habit as being wiser, cheaper, and tastier. But the most important part, perhaps, is the fact that such testimonials and the decisions the party took served their purpose. In less than 7 years, in the cities at least, the consumption of sweetmeats has tripled. Candies were so important for the party that even in 1943, during famine, the daily ration of a Moscow worker included, among other things, 40 grams of candies and sugar. And candies kept being important even on the eve of World War II. If it's to take into account that a caramel weighted around 8 grams and use the data we have and a little bit of math, then we can guess that through the hands of a worker in 1924, for example, during a month could have passed around 70 candies, and together with them, obviously, the ideas of the new political regime. There are 6 details to mention when talking about this a typical political militant. First of all, Candies always remained faithful to the ideas of the Communist Party. Secondly, they used visual metaphors and a preset visual code in order to communicate. Thirdly, they made clear who are the public enemies and who are the friends of the people. In the fourth place, they had spread gender ideas. In the fifth place, they tended to conceal reality. And last but not least, they covered a wide variety of topics regarding people's daily life. In such a way, the party could spread its ideas about the perfect right lifestyle and behavior. Next, I'm going to analyze each of the 6 details and bring examples. Any change in the official discourse of the authorities was almost immediately spotted on candy wrappers as well. For instance, the ideas regarding the identity of the local heroes. Work was considered really important in order to build a communist society. Not by chance, the party thought that for the new communist society they were making, the working class members are the best heroes. To be more specific, at first, the party has decided to choose as heroes the figure of the blacksmith. The blacksmiths were important in both villages and cities. They also had a good image in the Slavic folklore. And last but not least, they could serve as a wonderful metaphor for a new soft society that needed toughness and someone's skills to shape it. Later, though, things started to change due to some misunderstandings within the party. Feeling betrayed by people like Trotsky, Stalin started to think that just by depicting working class members while working wasn't enough. He wanted the artists to start depicting people that are also always ready to fight and support the party, just like the revolutionary Bolshevik heroes once did. So these types of heroes started to appear more and more often on the candy wrappers in the second part of the 20s. Unlike the previous heroes, these ones were carrying red flags in their hands. They were often depicted also oversized, while stepping proudly on the ruins of the old world and having on the background the new world, the electrified and industrialized city. Curiously, some of these heroes were also wearing the same hat as Lenin did. In the 30s, things changed once again, because the party changed its mind once again. With the first 5-year plan completed in 1932, the society was believed to be in full development. So for a new developed society, the party obviously wanted new heroes, young, active, enthusiast communists, exactly the way we can see them today on candies like New Era. The image depicted on New Era is in fact that of a sculpture created in 1937 by Vera Muchina for the Soviet Pavilion at the International Exhibition in Paris. Noteworthy is the angle from which the sculpture was depicted on the candies, as if trying to suggest that for the party, the industrial field and the workers were more important than peasants and agriculture. Official data is supporting this statement. During 1926-1927, for example, the party allocated 20 times more money for the health of the workers than for the health of the peasants. Some other candy wrappers are suggesting us pretty the same thing. Let's say this one, for example. If we look at it, at first we just see a worker and a peasant shaking hands. But if we look twice and we look more carefully at the body language of these two, then we will realize that in fact, this candy wrapper is suggesting us that the new leader in the communist society is the worker, not the peasant. Candy wrappers can also reveal us the tendency the artist had to use visual metaphors and a preset visual code in order to speed up and facilitate the reception of the depicted messages. For Soviet citizens, it was really easy to guess, let's say, if a man depicted on the candy wrappers was a worker, a member of the party, or a peasant, just by looking, among other things, if this man was wearing a beard or a mustache. But for Soviet citizens, it was as easy to guess a woman's political views, just by looking at the way her headscarf was depicted. The knot was really important in this story. A knot behind the neck was used to reveal a real supporter of the communist regime. while a note under the chin revealed a supporter of the old political regime, and hence a public danger. In fact, Soviet citizens needed to know their heroes, but they also needed to know their enemies, especially while living in a country where, after the Civil War, 50 different types of enemies were identified, and their number kept growing. Spotting the enemies on the candy wrappers was as easy as identifying the heroes, due to the metaphors and the preset visual code the artist used. Usually, enemies were depicted as fat, greedy people with round noses, sharp teeth, and wearing glasses. Some other times, they also appeared in a more metaphorical way, in the shape of a lightning or a knife. But the most important detail when talking about enemies is the fact that almost always they were depicted while being punished. The most common means of punishment depicted on the candy wrappers were stabbing them, punching them, or throwing them into the sea. Now, the question is, were the enemies really always punished as the Soviet authorities wanted people to believe? The party never took into account, it seems, the possibility that some future-to-be enemies might become immortal and hence remain unpunished forever, thanks to the candy wrappers. At least this was the case of Grigory Zinoviev. Zinoviev was a revolutionary Bolshevik hero and a member of the Communist Party, but he later fell into disfavor and was executed. Stalin managed to eliminate Zinoviev from the Communist political leadership, but the Soviet ruler never actually managed to completely erase Zinoviev from candy wrappers as well, on which he survived until our days, smiling, happy, and apparently unpunished. Of course, the opposite of the public enemies were the friends of the people, everybody that liked and supported the party. So Soviet citizens were able to unwrap back then candies on which people like Karl Marx appeared, or they were able to see the portrait of people like Felix Dzerzhinsky, Anatoly Lunacharsky, and even the portraits of the Soviet rulers, Lenin, and most probably Stalin as well. Although none of the 200 candy wrappers which I analyzed contains the portrait of Stalin on it, there are evidences that his face actually appeared on food packaging. And one of these evidences can be found in the trip journal of the Colombian author Gabriel Garcia Marquez. In the Viaje por Europa del Este, the author is talking about his trip in the Soviet Union in the 50s and is mentioning this detail regarding Stalin and food packaging. If it's to talk about the candy wrappers on which Lenin appeared and which survived until our days, I will mention two details. First, that for some of these candy wrappers, the candy factories used a photo of Lenin, this one, part of the first official series of photos of the Bolshevik leader taken in 1918 by the photographer Moise Noppelbaum, especially for propaganda reasons. And the second detail is the fact that some of these candy wrappers on which Lenin appeared can serve us today as a proof regarding the lack of paper in Soviet Union, and also the need and the desire the party felt to spread its ideas as soon as possible, using all the available means of propaganda. So, not by chance, for a certain amount of time, Soviet citizens unwrapped this candy with Lenin's portrait on it, called fungus, gribok in Russian. This candy was definitely less about Lenin or Communist Party's hallucinogenic powers, and more about the lack of paper in Soviet Union, and also about the decision the candy factories had to take, following the orders of the authorities, to use old candy wrappers and print new proper images on top, like in this case. Also, candy wrappers can reveal us a little bit about the gender discourse in the Soviet Union. For a long amount of time, women were considered ignorant and were seen as an obstacle to development. Not by chance, gradually, in the Soviet Union, agriculture was feminized, while the industrial field, considered really important in order to build a communist society, was more often depicted with the help of male's image. But the use of women to depict agriculture might have had another purpose as well, a political one. We shouldn't forget that women were the main opponents of collectivization, even creating the so-called Baby Bund movement against it. On candy wrappers, however, women always appeared smiling, happy, waving red flags, supporting the party, and even going straight after work in order to visit the cultural houses. Although studies carried out at the time proved us exactly the opposite. Women were not interested in the cultural houses or in the communist politics and ideas. Obviously, the party knew the truth, but the party also knew that it needs and it wants to be supported by women as well. So what the party did was to ask the artists to depict party's dreams, needs, desires, rather than the reality. And this is not the only case when the reality on the candy wrappers was completely different from the daily life reality. As I said, the party needed supporters, so it used propaganda in order to convince as many people as possible that life in the Soviet Union was actually great and also sweet. It was more complicated to convince peasants, though, because they have complained more than once that artists had no idea what reality in the Soviet villages looked like, and peasants were right. Villages appeared on candy wrappers like dreamy places. For instance, there were airplanes flying above them, throwing the newspaper Pravda, the truth. There were peasants apparently enjoying reading their newspaper, and tractors working on the fields. The truth is that 80% of Soviet Union's population actually couldn't read. And at the beginning of the collectivization, when this candy wrapper appeared, more than 88% of the collective households still did not own even a single tractor. Moreover, life was so great in the Soviet villages that from the beginning of the collectivization and until the end of the 40s, more than 20 million peasants have migrated to the cities, fleeing from hunger and in search of a job. So this candy wrapper we are looking at actually appeared in the glorious times of the Great Soviet Union, when the country was producing in a year per person 12 meters of cotton fabric, 80 centimeters of wool fabric, half of a boot, a sock, or a pair of underwear for every 20 citizens. The utopia on the candy wrappers was self-sustaining. On another wrapper, this one, we can see a huge boat near a poem, suggesting that the Soviet grains will conquer America. It is clearly a message regarding Soviet Union's power and richness, but there is something that this small candy wrapper is not revealing us, the big truth. Mainly the fact that the exported grains were taken by force following the orders of Stalin, and that the amount of the exported grain in the 30s could have saved, according to historians, the life of almost 7 million people, a number similar to those who have starved to death in 1943 during famine. The same candy wrapper is also not revealing us anything about the law of Stalin from 1932, also known as the law of the 5 years of wheat, according to which anyone who tried back then to steal at least a single ear of wheat was to be punished by death, or at best, with 10 years in prison. The party also used candy wrappers in order to depict and spread its ideas about the perfect right lifestyle for both adults and children, the latter being considered really important as future members of the Communist Party, future supporters of the party, and why not future soldiers for the Red Army. If we will look carefully at the analyzed candy wrappers, we will see that whether on them appear children or adults, on 50% of them, everybody is caught doing something. It's caught in action, working, reading, playing games, sports. This is not so surprising because in the Soviet Union, the perfect communist was described as a person who led an active life, who even loved his country in an active way, and who also had a carefully planned active life. In fact, Alexei Gastev, the pioneer of scientific management in Russia, even suggested a time management plan for all the Soviet citizens. Astonishing, his plan did not include even a minute in which people to be free to choose how to use this minute, their free time. Everything had to be carefully checked and approved by the authorities. And some candy wrappers also suggested different time management plans for kids or adults. In this case, was a plan easier to remember: 8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, and 8 hours of relaxing, although relaxing in the Soviet Union meant relaxing in an active way, which meant working. On 25% of the analyzed candy wrappers are depicted children, and almost a quarter of them are smiling. If we look carefully at the candy wrappers, we will see that until the 30s, a happy childhood in the Soviet Union was a childhood spent outside, far away from home, and also far, far away from parents. It was exactly the time when the state said that it will assume the responsibility to grow and educate all the Soviet children, relieving parents from this apparently boring task of growing their own children and giving parents more time to do other activities. So candy factories and artists mirrored parties' ideas on the candy wrappers, and in order to keep kids away from vices and educate them in a good, healthy, active way, the artists often suggested kids different kind of good, healthy activities. Boys were encouraged, for example, to practice sports like boxing, football, cycling. Girls were also invited to practice sports like tennis or swimming, although girls' main activity on the candy wrappers, in this case, just like in the real life, remained household activities. Because were considered better and smarter, the boys were also used to show the benefits the state care children had. Especially pioneers served as a proof. With their perfectly combed hair and dressed neatly and doing good healthy activities, their image contrasted with that of the kids who apparently did not enjoy the benefits of the Soviet school, like this boy on the naughty boy candy, and were expected to spend the entire day on the streets in dirty, ripped, dusty clothes, doing unhealthy activities, spreading diseases, and becoming a public danger. After the 40s, however, the party suddenly changed its mind, saying officially in 1932 that the main cause of juvenile delinquency was in fact bad parental care. Parents were already expected to be involved in the education of their children, and especially women were expected to do this. So from the 40s, the artists started to depict kids already inside their home or near adults, parents, siblings, and so on. So in conclusion, candy wrappers can be seen as small alternative history textbooks, which can no longer be modified as was once done by printing an image on top of another or by censorship, as was once done. It is also important to know that all the candy wrappers had to be carefully checked and approved by the authorities, and they had to gain a lot of signatures, as we can see, before reaching the market. And even if looking at the candy wrappers today seems like taking a sneak peek into people's daily life, we shouldn't forget that candy wrappers tended to conceal reality, and that any change in the official discourse of the authorities had an impact on the visual discourse of the candy wrappers. This happened because both candies and candy factories were politicized, and they were expected to support the party. It is also important to see that the frequency with which the party spread its main ideas using all the available means of propaganda and a preset visual code increased the chances that their message will reach their destination, will be correctly decoded and memorized. And also the use of image instead of text enhanced the readability of the depicted messages. So really small, compact, colorful, and easy to keep, these unusual political militants turned out in time also into great storytellers of a bygone era. In other words, if the Japanese people showed us with the help of origami art that paper can actually talk, then the Soviet authorities, with the help of the Candies, proved to us that candy wrappers can also talk and help us unwrapping the history. I'd like to end this presentation by showing you a few candies that are still involved in politics in our days, in countries like Republic of Moldova, my hometown, in Russia, Pakistan, or South Korea, where I found Barack Obama on some gummy candy box. And this means that candies still have a lot of things to tell, and they are still interested in politics, even today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Can you hear me, Raluca?
Yes, I can hear you. I hope the presentation went well. And
very well. I would like to thank you for this wealth of extraordinary images that we don't see very often. And it went very well, and it was really fascinating. And the mix between candies and politics is quite unusual. And
made politics taste sweet, in other words.
Exactly. And we're going to open, we have 15 minutes for discussion. So we're going to take questions, of course. But I would like to ask you very simply, very briefly, how did you get started? How did you get started being interested in candy wrappers specifically? That's one thing. And where do you get them? Where is your archive of wrappers? Okay, simple questions, and then we'll move on to other more sophisticated ones. But thank you.
Thank you too. As a kid, I was really interested in candies, and I even used to keep all the candy wrappers of the candies I used to eat. Of course, they were not Soviet candy wrappers, but the idea of this research actually came while reading a novel of a Romanian author. Vishniek is his name. He works in France, actually. And he was talking about packaging that came from Europe and helped people to destroy in a certain way the communist regime. So I thought back then, what about candies or another kind of packaging that helped actually to build the communist regime and make it alive and sweet for the people? And as for the other questions about where is my archive, as I said at the beginning, I took the candy wrappers from different virtual sources. Actually, people can buy today candy wrappers. It seems that some people from those times saved them also because they were so colorful and attractive, and maybe because they reminded them about their childhood.
Are they expensive?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, not really. It really depends how old is the candy wrapper and what it is depicted on it. Because if it's just, I don't know, animals or usually the most expensive ones are with the politicians from them.
I bet, yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to open the floor to questions from the audience, the viewers. Do we have any questions to Raluca? I just want to make sure that if there is a question, I can see it in the chat line. As we wait for more questions, Raluca, I would like to ask you about the article you just published, which I mentioned when I presented your profile, gendering taste. Could you say a bit more? It's quite intriguing.
Yes, I studied the advertisement from daily newspaper from Interwar, Romania, one of the most popular in here, and I paid attention whether the certain types of food were more associated with the image of women or with the image of men. And at the end, I realized that women were in fact not expected to eat, but rather to take care of them and to be fit and beautiful. And also the majority of the foods associated with women were the liquids, like tea or champagne, sometimes coffee with milk. But men were more often associated with hard food that you can chew, like meat or like mustard that went well with meat. With wines, because men were expected to have more elevated, an elevated taste. Women were more expected to choose the food for their husbands or kids, not for themselves.
But wine is liquid, right?
Yes. Well, the tea, the water associated with women, it's when you choose something, you actually can feel the taste, but just swallowing the food makes you not feel the taste so well. And perhaps the position of women in society is also like something liquid. It doesn't have a very specific position in society. It is more often expected to not have its own opinion, her own opinion, or work somewhere. She just has to do something that everybody else is telling her to do.
Okay, so the nature of the food is polarized.
Yes, and it seems like from those times.
Yeah. Tatiana has a question for you. Hello, Tatiana.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for such an interesting presentation. So I was wondering if you found, I'm guessing the dating is quite difficult when it comes to that kind of ephemera, but I was wondering if you found like a body of rappers that come from the new economic policy period, NEP, this kind of return or partial return to the like free market. And how that fits into the analysis that you've presented us with.
Actually, I found one candy wrapper from this period, that period. I don't know if you can see it here.
Yes.
But just one from those times. There are people like very fancy, unlike the peasants and workers that usually appeared on the candy wrappers. And it has more vivid colors, kind of. The others are more red and black and white, or white and red, this type of colors. But in that period, at least if we look at this candy wrapper, the single candy wrapper which I found, it's more colors, more colorful, and the people are dressed well, completely different than the others. And you are right, it's very complicated to know the year of appearance of a certain candy wrapper because the year appeared only after 1945 on the candy wrappers. So in order to guess in what year a certain candy wrapper appeared, we should pay attention to the image depicted because usually it follows the discourse of the authorities, or maybe to some details. For example, in a conference, Stalin said that all the churches have completely disappeared from Soviet Union. So this means that a certain candy wrapper where we can see a church in the background definitely couldn't appear after this conference of Stalin, because the artists simply couldn't contradict Stalin. They just followed his ideas. And also another key element we can check in order to guess the year of appearance is the name of the candy factory. because until 1922, the old name of the candy factory appeared near the new name of the candy factory. So after that, only the new name appeared after 1922.
Interesting, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Is there another question for Raluca?
I can ask another question in the meantime. I mean, again, it's probably, you know, maybe a very difficult question to answer, but it's also, this moment is a kind of contested moment in terms of, you know, defining the Soviet identity as opposed to, you know, Russian, Belarusian, Ukrainian, Tajik, whatever. So there is this kind of process of centralization and homogenizing of, I guess, the Soviet nationality. Have you found any kind of variation in terms of ethnic identity, in terms of race, like that kind of, or maybe in that respect, like the places where the images, or I guess the candies were produced, like, is it all coming from, you know, central Russia and dispersed through the regions, or, yeah?
It's one of the last slides I showed during the conclusions with all the signatures proves that they used kind of the same candy wrappers, but they translated them in different languages, but they kept the image. And as for the ethnicity, yes, there were different kind of ethnicities depicted on the candy wrappers. Like here we can see some.
And so, in this case, when it's, you know, kind of a type, right?
Yes.
The text in Russian or in the language of that?
No, it's in Russian.
Interesting.
Every time in Russian, in the candy wrappers I found at least. But they wanted kind of to suggest that all the people were friends in the Soviet Union. So everybody wanted to be together and so on.
I think Wonkai wants to ask you something. Would you like to raise your question to Raluca? Wonkai? Or maybe through email. Okay. Do we have other questions? I was interested myself in knowing where do you go from your analysis of candy wrappers to other material food items? Is there something you are going to explore next? Are you going to be the candy wrapper expert?
I don't know. I never thought about that, but I guess it will be really interesting to check in Germany, in the Nazi Germany, how they use the candies, because it seems they also use sometimes the candies in order to make their politics sweet. In fact, in a novel called Austerlitz by Sebald, the author is mentioning a candy with a raspberry color that has the Nazi sign on it, and that it's melting in people's mouths. So this is quite interesting because it can make us think that in a way we can eat politics as well and feel the taste of politics.
Okay, so yeah. All right. Wonkai wrote, how do you get the candy wrapper? I think it's more or less the question I think I asked about the archive, about how do you...
Yes, I took them from virtual sources, different virtual sources. Actually, they are easy to find it, I think, even on eBay, or if someone wants to buy candy wrapper can check. I don't have this candy wrappers like in my home or somewhere.
Yeah, and do you have to pay for rights for using the pictures for your book, for example?
Not really, because they're like there. online. So
I see. Okay. What about chocolate? Chocolate in France?
chocolate bars.
Yes, we used to have images coming with, you know, the chocolate bar, a big image, 60s, 70s, that you would collect. Do you see what I mean? Quite a picture coming with the chocolate bar. Yeah.
No, I didn't find pictures that came with the chocolate bars, but maybe because they didn't really use chocolate so often. They used chocolate more for the party's members than for the people because it was very expensive. And the image on chocolates usually wasn't so interesting as the image on candy drops or caramels that were for the people, like for the majority, for the kids, for their parents to see, to check.
All right.
But
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I think I found a study about the chocolate boxes in the Soviet Union, but I don't remember right now the author. But I think if people are interested, can Google about it. There are not so, I didn't find so many studies about candies, which is quite weird because they are quite attractive if you look at the candy wrappers and quite sweet.
Indeed. Okay, I think there's a request for the title of your article or book. If you could give it to everybody in the chat line. Okay, share it. Do you have access to the chat line?
Yes, I have access, but the book is in Romanian. So I don't know if I have an article published in about Soviet candy wrappers in a magazine from Malta. So maybe later I'll check exactly the name and to give all the details.
All right. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, remember Malta. This is how we met.
Yes.
Years ago. I was just fascinated. You know, why well, I got in touch with you after, you know, this brilliant presentation. Well, I would like to give you a real warm thanks for this presentation, Raluca, which was really a pleasure. And it really opens, you know, venues for new explorations, new types of exploration on material culture. And I hope to hear from you and to discover, you know, your new fields of exploration research well, Candies and otherwise. And I would like to thank all participants today. And Ariane Fento is not with us, but I would like to give Ariane a tremendous thanks for her splendid organization of this webinar throughout, you know, the whole year, the lockdown year. And well, we miss her today, but she will, of course, watch the recorded video. And yeah, thank you, Ariane, merci, Ariane, pour tout. Okay, so goodbye for now.